Armstrong and Worthington Industries combined forces to become the #1 ceiling grid manufacturer in the world. But it didn't start out that way. Now, I moved from Chicago as a production supervisor in a ceiling grid plant to Sparrows Point, Maryland as the industrial engineering and quality assurance manager. I was responsible for the quality of the grid produced at the plant, and initially we had a higher than industry average returns rate. And we needed to get better, and I needed to understand why that was. So I spent many hours on the factory floor, observing how people measured and produced product, asking questions, and trying to figure out why our measurements weren't consistent and we were having so many returns. I found out there were many reasons, but it came down to two basic critical reasons. The first was our product quality drawings were really difficult to understand, and each person measuring our grid was inconsistent in their approach, and they could actually get measurements that differed by as much as 20 thousandths of an inch from person to person on the same piece of grid. Now that might not sound like a lot, but unfortunately for us, grid had a tolerance very close to that 20 thousandths. So it was easy to be incorrect when we were in spec, and also incorrect when we were out of spec. So we had to resolve both things. So the first thing I realized I needed to work on were the product quality drawings. Now, they had been designed by engineers for engineers and required people to use math. They'd get a spec plus or minus a number to figure out what the upper tolerance was and the lower tolerance. Well, not everybody's good at math, as it turns out. And so as I talked to the operators, I realized sometimes they were adding and subtracting those tolerances incorrectly. So what would have been easier for them was to have a range. From this range to this range is the acceptable limit for the measurement. So with hundreds of drawings, I had to prioritize which ones were the most critical first, and then work my way through all of them eventually. Now, the second thing I needed to do was get a more consistent approach to measurement. So I bought some new, more repeatable equipment, but I also realized people were different in their approach to that equipment. Some had a very strong touch, some had a very light touch. So we had to devise a method that would make it more consistent from person to person. And I called it the two-touch method. The idea was bring the device to hit the bar, back off a little bit, and then come back to lightly touch the bar. When we taught everybody to do that, we brought our measurement inconsistency down by a factor of 7. What that means is people that had been different by as much as 20 thousandths of an inch were now different by less than 3 thousandths of an inch. Once we got both of those things figured out, our claims and returns rate went way down, and we grew to become the #1 grid producer in the world. So the lesson here is design your systems for the people that use them, not the highly complex folks that design equipment, materials, and measuring devices. I hope you enjoyed this story, gained some insight, and learned something you can use. You'll find many more Kaizen stories on my website, www.pi-partners.com. If you'd like help growing your profits through sustained process improvement, scan the QR code on the screen for a free consultation, and let's start our journey together.